happiness is motivation, and maybe another way to kind of cleanly present this idea. And the NVIDIA founder, Jensen Huang.
I saw him.
Yeah.
Well, the CEO. Is he the CEO?
And founder. And he was working at Denny's for like 6 years as a dishwasher.
I saw him being interviewed on Squawk Box. I think it was over the weekend, so it wasn't Squawk Box. It was yesterday.
Talking about greatness?
Well, he was talking about AI, and I caught the last part of AI, but man, that guy is, he's smart. God.
So he was talking about greatness, it was like, in other words, I wish you a lot of pain and despair, because that's what greatness truly entails. Yeah. Dealing with a lot of fucking pain and even with the great bands, I was listening to the Black Keys. They had like this fireside chat. They were looking for a bass player after one didn't work out, and they just didn't find someone that could mesh. Tons of great bass players, but they just weren't willing to deal with the same amount of shit. Going and sleeping in a van, in some bumfuck nowhere parking lot in Ohio or whatever, week in, week out, day in, day out for God knows how long, right? And just don't find a lot of people willing to deal with a lot of shit, you know? And
again, I'd said, you have to be able to do it. You have to know your place, and you have to want to do it.
Yeah,
and you have to have the personality to mesh. So the more extreme you are in a personal view, the harder it is to mesh with all the mass or the crowd. Right. So, that's one of the things I've found about managers and people I've seen who are good with managing people. Rarely do I have seen, of course, it was military, and I say corporate America. I worked for private, family-owned operations and whatnot, but the alpha dominant drivers were not creative. They were laser focused on keeping it going and keeping the paycheck signed every month or 2 weeks or whatever. So if you're going to run a company, man, I mean, that's I'm not trying to discourage. The creative output is important, and there are plenty of people, I'm sure, that run companies that. In fact, I met a guy that played bass in town. He owned a truck rental trucks. He would rent trucks and send trucks over to do commercial work, dump trucks and stuff. He owned a fleet of them, and I'm sure was very well off. And he sang and played bass in rock bands here in Atlanta.
Wait, but was Walt Disney or Henry Ford, not creative? I mean, obviously Walt Disney.
And their business, business was.
But I mean, even like with Henry Ford, I mean, he was very into like media production and like
they asked him as far as creativity goes. They wanted to change the color of the Model T, and he said people can have any color they want as long as it's black.
I've learned that the hard way.
He was very. I think he was. Talk about a focused guy.
Right, but again, I think there's like
he was
different ways to lump in or categorize creativity.
Yes, I was just going to say he was creative. I wouldn't call him artistically creative, although an argument I'm sure could be made for that. I mean, he invented the assembly line, right?
And who knows what he was really doing personally? Like he could have been a singer, But there's a lot of that's not representative people, or maybe not commonly representative people, that if you like look back at them, there's a bigger picture than what they're just known for in a lot of cases.
Sure, yeah. People are complex.
Yeah. And one other thing, I just wrap this up, you're talking about like timelines and again, so many people there's the people that won't even get started, but then there's the people that give up too early, right? And there's like, oh, you're doing the same thing expecting the same results. I think that's also another way that people just like fucking brush off. And like there is truth to that in some situations, but what looks the same to you on the outside is not the same on the inside, right? And what I'm getting at is, you look at like a Warren Buffett, right? Not that anyone's or everyone's definition of success should be, based off of being a successful public market investor, right? Like he was. But he was in it since he was like in his 30s and maybe even younger, right? But most of his wealth that he like is his form of success wasn't until his 60s, literally decades at it, right? And that's like people I don't think enough in decades as opposed to what can I do in a couple years, generate some cash that I can maybe live on for the next couple of decades.
Don't think it was 60s. I think in his 40s, early 40s, he was becoming a very wealthy man.
I think he was starting to make millions, but it wasn't until in his 60s that it started to turn into billions.
I mean, the big money came later, but I mean, he was wealthy, and I mean, he started as a teenager.
But that's just like, we're a lot closer to being, 100 millionaires than, the 100 millionaire is to even being a billionaire, right? And orders of magnitude, especially when you go up in the billions, right? And again, even the cash, element aside, you look at the Henry Ford. He started working on car engines, when he was in his early 20s. Started his first company. I think he was 28, round about then. But he didn't even start Ford Motor Company until we know, like the one that we know it, until he was 40, and it was still like another handful of years until he got the Model T out that started becoming popular, and it was still even a couple years before he got that to the scale that could be produced and affordable enough for the everyday person. And people are just like, oh well, you clearly haven't had your success. You haven't raised millions of dollars or generated millions of dollars of revenue. And it's like, okay, we could if we were doing something a lot less complex. Honestly, I mean, that's a part of it, right? And like building a drone company, right? It's not like, hey, let's just make a software application that's used to like do checkouts at a restaurant or something, right? Could we, not trying to say that's easy, right? But there are varying degrees of difficulty, right? Like building a car company, another degree of difficulty over building a drone company, at least the size drones that we're building, right? But needless to say, I think what I'm trying to get at is the timing element is like, oh my God, that person is so crazy. They've been working at it and like they have next to nothing to show for it. But until they do, right? And
there's a lot more cases where people don't make it. What you're looking at are the examples you quote here. There's always going to be the lottery winner, right?
Yeah.
But look at all the people that went to the place and bought the lottery ticket and didn't win. So it's kind of like when you see pictures from people on vacation and you see all the fun stuff they're doing. Well, you're seeing the tip of the iceberg, right?
Yeah.
You're seeing the highlights. I showed a photo of us.
But what do you want to focus more on? Being and learning from the.
My point is that you're seeing a tiny speck. There's a ton of stuff always underneath that never gets seen, and all the work involved and the effort. One thing that I'm really adamant on saying is that anything, well, the old adage, anything worth doing is worth doing right, and anything that's the more prestige you're going to get, the more money you're going to get, the harder it's going to be to obtain it, and the more focus and the more energy and the more work a person, in my opinion, is going to have to do. Yes, there are those gifted people who don't have to work hard, but they're few and far between. Mozart grew up his whole life. All he knew, he grew up in a musical family. He was surrounded by music. He wasn't playing a video game, and when he felt like working on the piano, that was his life.
Yeah.
And was he in that? He was gifted. Absolutely, he was a genius, as so many of those guys were. But I think we're so busy today. We have so many distractions.
Too much entertainment.
They didn't have the internet back then, right? So I don't know.
Again, obviously,
it's a warning to you.
Yeah, time will tell.
A warning about the vocal thing. Yeah, that's a friendly warning.
Yeah. Time will tell, but I again would much rather be working, still 40, working to bring drones at a mass scale to the everyday household, everyday business than, hey, you know what? This may not work out, and so why even bother trying? Right? And that's one example with singing or whatever. It's like, hey, you know what? Let me get started. It's something I wanted to do, and I'm the only person in my way of doing it, right? And so, if that's the case, let me get out of my own way.
Yeah, that's